anyway, so today we kick off or get into this next series, or we're in 8 of 12, going through the 12 steps. The deep spirituality of the 12 steps meets the Enneagram, which is an ancient personality assessment that helps us see ourselves with greater clarity, hopefully, and that's what we're about. And we're on step 8 today, which is we made a list of all persons we had harmed because we did something stupid, right, Brian? Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Now, the action step in this is very interesting to me. Throughout the 12 steps, they take pause. They break it down into smaller steps, which I think is brilliant. And this willingness thing to just do the next step shows up, I think, 3 times. And I think it's just absolutely brilliant because we like to rush into things. But we got to realize there's an a priori activity that has to happen where we have to create this willingness ahead of time before the action step is actually going to stick. And so there's a willingness to just make a list about the ways that we've done something stupid that prepares us to actually do something about the stupid things that we've done. That's the making amends stuff. But today's just about making the list and being willing to do that. So that's not too scary, is it? Well, as I was thinking about this, I was reminded of a trip Lynn and I took just 2 weeks ago to Yosemite. Actually, I had to take a trip to Fresno to teach some pastors some stuff, and nobody wants to go to Fresno, but I invited Lynn to go to Fresno so that we could hop over to Yosemite right afterwards and spend a couple days there. And Lynn and I love the same kinds of things, and we loved it. I mean, Yosemite is one of my favorite places to be. It's actually one of your favorite places to be, even if you haven't been there, you just don't know it yet, but it's an incredible place. It's like going to the ocean, where you just feel very small right away. It's such a beautiful place. I don't know if you know the history of it, but when some of the first Caucasian people, anyway, saw it and sketched it out, and they sent these sketches back to Washington, D.C. to start talking about protecting this space, they thought this was Fantasyland. They thought they were making it up. There's no way one place could have this much beauty. That's how it is. So anyway, Lynn and I were there for a couple days, and it was extraordinary. And we were on the valley floor most of the time, up more toward Half Dome, which you can kind of see peeking out in the distance there, and hiking around that. And just extraordinarily beautiful. And on the way out, we decided to take a moment and pull off the road and take in El Capitan, which is on the left side here. It's this massive granite monolith that is basically this cliff, 3,000 feet high from the valley floor to the top. Just to put that into perspective, you could stack 2 Empire State Buildings on top of each other and it still wouldn't reach the top. You could put 3.5 Transamerica buildings from San Francisco and it still wouldn't reach the top. You could put 10 football fields up the face of that face of that granite. Isn't that extraordinary? If you could put somehow the human ego on a vertical continuum, it could not hold Yasiel Puig's ego, not even close. But that gives you some idea. Anyway, no Giants fans in the house appreciating that? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So anyway, we're looking at this thing, and it was a Saturday afternoon. And so I'm kind of a nerd on this stuff, so I brought a couple pair of binoculars so we can see stuff. And one of the cool things to do is you look on the face of these rocks all around, and you can often see climbers, which is pretty breathtaking and unbelievable. And so we pulled off, and just with the naked eye, we're looking up there for quite a while, and we didn't see any climbers. But there were people camped out with their lawn chairs and stuff, like they actually had loved ones up there. So I figured, well, that's weird. What are these people? Maybe they just really like El Cap. I don't know. And so we looked a little harder, didn't see anybody. So we grabbed our binoculars out, and we're looking, and for the first few moments, we gazed. We didn't see anybody. I thought, well, this is crazy. And we took a deep breath, and we slowed down, and we looked more slowly and carefully. And then just a dot of color would show up about halfway. Somebody's red shirt or yellow jacket or something like that. And as soon as we could see one, as soon as our eyes were trained to see one, it's like all of a sudden the world opened up. And before you knew it, we could spot 20 in a line. In peak season on El Cap, just on El Cap, there could be as many as 80 climbers on that thing. And if you're just walking by, you won't see them. You have to slow down. You have to train your eyes to see what is right before you the whole time. And that has a lot to do with step 8. Step 8 is perhaps easier for people who have the addiction of a substance, alcohol, drugs, whatever, because there are more examples perhaps that are readily available to say, oh, I do have some stuff here that I guess I did when I was loaded or on my way to loaded or wanting to get loaded, and so this is what happened to me. And some of those things are horrific. I've been a pastor. In 2020, I will have had a Rev in front of my name for 25 years. I know, I'm so young. How is that even possible? So that's a lot of people over that amount of time. That's a lot of stories over that amount of time. And of course, in that time, I've known a lot of family members, parents, spouses, children, that are connected to somebody struggling with the disease of alcoholism. And stories that just break your heart of the way that the disease caused their loved ones to behave in ways that were deeply, deeply painful. Heart-wrenching stuff. Real pain. That step 8 hopefully will be the stepping point to get to step 9 where that relationship can start to get healed. And sometimes it's so incredibly painful. I was talking to one person long after they got clean and had years under this person's belt. And I'd already known the story from the parents' side because I got to know the parents first, and the parents were telling me about some of the horrific chapters of their life with their child and what that meant for them, and how it finally got to this point, a breaking point, where they had to do what no parent ever wants to do, which is to say, you can't be here in this home anymore. Unbelievably painful. The mom couldn't do it. Dad had to be the one to draw the line. And as you can imagine, this person, recognizing that they were about to lose their shelter, their home, which was enabling them, pulled out every stop, used every card to try to convince the parents to just give them one more chance. This time I mean it, whatever, you know how it works. And did as best they could, but they'd heard it before and they'd been there before. And so they kept the line. And it helped set this person on a course for recovery. And this person told me that. Said if they hadn't have done that hard move, which I hated at the time and resented them for it at the time, I never would have gotten clean. And so then I got to know the addict, the recovering addict. I was asking the person, what were you thinking? Did you have any idea what kind of pain you were putting your parents through? And the person said, no, I had no idea. And I said, how is that possible? And the person said, well, when you are stuck in addiction, your world is all about you. And while you might care about other people in your life, what you care most about is yourself and your disease and feeding that disease. And you will do anything in order to feed that habit. And so this step is difficult for all of us, a little easier for people who have struggled with one of these types of things. But as we've learned in Richard Rohr's Breathing Underwater, we are all addicts. You may not know it, but you are. And to use his terminology, we are all addicted to our own personal happiness program, the things that we do to try to deal with the pain that we have as being human beings, to get through life. And that mode of being, that system that we've created, that personal happiness program, is not perfect, it's flawed, and depending where we are in our maturity, can be fairly healthy or pretty darn destructive. And when we're in our less mature state, our less developed area in our life, which doesn't really have a lot to do with age, but hopefully we mature more as we chronologically grow older. But when we're in that younger state, we do cause a lot of pain in the lives of people around us. And step 8 helps us come to grips with that. And it's not a fun thing to do. Aren't you glad you came today? It is a worthwhile thing to do. And to help make this point, I came across a new website this week that's just full of great resources on recovery stuff. And I tripped onto this video of this guy. I think he's awesome. I think you're going to enjoy this guy. He's got a secret sauce, man. I mean, I love listening to this guy. So I want you to hear this guy talk about step 8 on this video on the next slide, and then I'll be back to talk to you a little bit more. So let's hit it.
Now we come to step 8, another scary step for many people, but step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Once again, we pick up pen and pencil. As a matter of fact, step 4 might help you as you pick up pen and pencil to do step 8. So some people burn step 4 after they do a step 5, but other people recommend that you not burn it, that you hold on to it, and that will help you as you enter into step 8. So as you enter into step 8, now you want to make a list of all persons you have harmed and become at least willing to make amends to them all. Okay, so now you're writing down a list of the people you have harmed. Now remember, this is you doing the people you have harmed. We're not talking about the people that harmed you. We understand that they may have been wrong and you may have been wrong, but you're cleaning up your side of the street. So you're making a list of the people you have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. And God knows that when we're in our addictions, we harm quite a few people. One of the biggest lies that people say to themselves is, I ain't hurt nobody but myself. This ain't hurt nobody but me. My children didn't even know. My family didn't know what I was doing. I always went to work. I was always there for my children's baseball game. I was always there when my daughter danced. Well, you may have been there and not been there at the same time. Because we can be there physically, but not there emotionally. But I'm not going to go into all that. This is you're writing down the people that you know that you have harmed. You're going to make a list of the people that you have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. I used to be a lady in a group I was in, and she used to get up and say, those amens are something. Those amens? Oh, Lord, those amens are hard. Those amens? And I would just laugh because she always had a way of saying amens. But what it highlights to me is the fact that this step does not say become willing to say you're sorry to them all. It says become willing to make amends to them all. And making amends is very different than just saying, I am sorry. So what we want to do is take pen and pencil and begin to make that list of those people that we have harmed. How have I harmed people in the sexual arena? What have I done? How have I harmed people financially? Have I stolen? Have I lied? Have I manipulated? How have I harmed people physically? Have I been in fighting, done things I ought not have done? How have I harmed people spiritually? Write that down. How have I harmed people in my family? How have I harmed people just by being somewhere as an example? Maybe I was supposed to be a leader. Where did I lead people? I write it down. I get it all down on paper. I make a list of all people I have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. But I'm not going to think about how I'm going to make amends or when I'm going to make amends or which way I'm going to make amends. That's not what I'm doing right now. I'm just becoming willing to make amends to them all. Let's get it down on paper. Let's write it down. How have I harmed people? What have I done? You see, this step, again, is going to help to free me This step is going to cause me to become, again, a part of the human race. This step acknowledges that even though there was a reason for my misbehavior, there's no excuse for it. The reason may be that I had a biological imbalance. The reason may be that I have an allergy. The reason may be that this disease caused me to do some things that if I didn't have this disease, I wouldn't do it. Well, you know, that reasoning is okay, but I can't make an excuse for the things I've done and act like it didn't hurt people. Yeah, you know, I am responsible. I've heard a lot of people say one of the things about going to a 12-step meeting, people are always saying, I am an addict, and my name is this, and I am an addict, and my name is that. And as long as they can say that they're an addict, that gives them, like, you know, a doorway to get away from responsibility. That means, well, I'm an addict, that's why I did this, and I'm an addict, and that's why I did that. But I see it the other way around. Once you admit what your problem is, you become more responsible for the things you've done. And you need to do something about it. It's like I heard someone say one time, if you come into a doctor's office not knowing you're a diabetic, and you go out knowing you're a diabetic, with the information telling you how to eat, how to take the insulin, you are now more responsible for what happens in your life and in the life of the people that love you. So when I came in, I didn't know I was powerless. When I came in, I didn't know I had some insane thoughts. When I came in, I didn't really look at my defects of character. But now that I'm here now, I realize I have shortcomings. I realize I have defects of character. I realize that there will come times where I may not have a mental defense against my addiction. I realize these things now, and now that I realize them, I need to write down the people that I have hurt and I have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. All. Even the ones that have done something to me, because this is my 12-step work. Maybe they have some things they need to make some amends about and some things they need to do. That's not my problem right now. I need to make amends concerning the people I have hurt and what I have done. I become willing to make amends to them all. And when I think about amends, like I said, I think about more than just saying I'm sorry. Amends is not just about saying I'm sorry. I don't know if it's correct interpretation from the dictionary, but I think about mending something. When something is torn apart, you have to mend it back together and bring it together. So to make amends means that I do whatever I can to try to make it right. Now, some things will never be right. There are some things I cannot undo. There are some things that it just can't be done. It's impossible. But those things that I can make amends about, I try my best to. You know, when I was in my addictions, I hurt a stepchild of mine very badly. And after years and years and years in recovery, one of the things that still bothered me was the fact that this stepchild was hurt deeply. And I used to see the stepchild periodically, and I would go to him and say, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, please forgive me, I'm so sorry. I would go say that to him over and over and over again. But here recently I saw the stepchild, and I went to him again, and I told him specifically some of the things that I had done. And then I explained to him how I knew it may have made him feel when I've done them. And then I said to him, if you need me to do anything to help you in your process because of the damage that I helped cause, I'll do anything. If you get in counseling, I'll ride hundreds of miles to come to your counseling service so we can talk. If you need finances, I'll come to try to help with the finances, to help you to deal with it. Whatever it takes. As a matter of fact, I had even stolen some money, and what did I have to do? I had to pay him back with interest. To me, that's what amends is about. Amends is not just going to say, I'm sorry. Amends is doing something about being sorry. They told the old joke about, excuse me for saying, they said Paleface was around the Native Americans. And he saw that the Native Americans were really humane, really spiritual, really loving people. And one day he came into the chief's teepee and he fell down crying. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. I'm so sorry we took your land. And the chief just looked at him and just looked at him. And after he got up, the chief said, now give us back our land. I'm not going into no political correctness or any such thing as that right now. But I do know that amends means doing more than saying, I am sorry. And so what I do is I make a list of those people, And then I get before my higher power and check out my willingness to make amends. Am I willing to make amends? And from that point, we move on, of course, to step 9.
Love that guy. You're going to hear from him next week, too. He's just cool, man. I could listen to that guy all day. Well, I was thinking about what he's talking about, and he's really getting at self-awareness and owning your own stuff and being aware of what you've done and who you are and how that's translated into your life. The question, how easy would it be for you to make a step 8 list? And there's not a step, I don't think, where you make a list of how everybody harmed you. That's not in the 12-step program. But I have a hunch that if that were, that'd be our favorite one, that'd be our favorite step. And if I were to give you a task right now, hey, make a list of all the people who've done you wrong, man, how many notebooks did we go through today, right? We can all do that. This one is harder. Our lizard brains are telling us, hey, protect yourself here. Don't look at the stuff that you've done because that could mean bad things about you that could be harmful. And so we have difficulty with that. We have difficulty with self-awareness. Now, luckily, I am impressively self-aware. Let me just tell you how self-aware I am. So at a very early age, I was reading psych-type books, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and other spiritual books because I wanted to know myself better. Got my degree in psychology because I knew I was going to ministry, so I wanted to understand myself better, wanted to understand other people better. Went into seminary, got to have a 3-year master's degree to be a pastor in our tribe anyway, and so lots of those courses are tons of group dynamics to help you understand who you are. So I think we can all agree that I'm a very self-aware person, wouldn't you? I mean, I could be the most self-aware person that you know, perhaps. Well, here's the problem. When we are absolutely certain that we are so self-aware and so in touch with who we are in our own emotional state, that alone, the research suggests, sets us up for lack of self-awareness. Are you familiar with the term? I know you are because I've talked about it over the years here. You're familiar with the term implicit bias? Implicit bias suggests that if you're in any culture, if you are a part of the dominant people group in that culture, particularly the ones that hold power, so in the United States, that's Caucasian. If you are a Caucasian, it doesn't matter if you're Caucasian or not, but in America, where Caucasian is the skin tone that commands the most power and authority. If you do an implicit bias test, which you can take for free through Harvard University today, if you like, people of every skin tone in America have an implicit bias in favor of white people and against people with varying shades of brown skin. You all have implicit bias. The research says that if you're a person who comes to me and says, Pastor, I have worked through this. I even have friends of color. So therefore, I no longer am biased against people with other skin tones than white. The research suggests that if that is where you are, you actually probably have more bias than the people who are unaware entirely. Why? Because you're telling yourself you're not biased. So that when you make a judgment call, it's not because of some implicit bias nonsense that Harvard came up with. Don't trust them. No, it's because of your clear-headed judgment, unbiased in every way. See what I'm saying? So I say that as a caution because I believe that, and I want to be self-aware. I want to be able to understand myself better and better, but the caveat to success with that is to realize the danger in telling myself, oh, I'm so self-aware, because that immediately sets me up for pride, for ego, and I've had recovery people tell me ego stands for edging God out. And when ego's there, we protect our ego so that we can feel good about ourselves. So there was a people group in Jesus' day, the Jewish leaders. The Jewish leaders were not happy with Jesus because Jesus would reinterpret scriptures that they all knew pretty well, and he knew his stuff really well, but a lot of the times when he would live his life and teach, what he was teaching, what he was doing, would contradict the ways that had been held for so long that the Jewish leadership was holding tight. Breaking a law here and there, because he interpreted things in a different way than they were. And sometimes he outright challenged the religious leaders. There's an entire chapter in Matthew devoted to Jesus just letting them have it, and just gives you the laundry list of just what they were up to. Well, one day, these religious leaders, toward the end of Jesus' life, asked him a question. And it was a test. Hey, Jesus, out of all 613 Jewish laws, what is the most important law? So on the next slide, Jesus gives them this answer. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. And you know what those religious leaders said after he gave them this answer? They said, "You're right." Which means that they already knew the answer to the question. They already knew the answer to the question. And yet, even though they already knew the answer to the question, to love God with all you got and to love your neighbor as yourself, they were failing miserably at executing both. They were doing a lousy job of loving God well, and they were doing a really lousy job at loving the people that they were called to serve. In some very egregious examples. Particularly for the poor and those who are most vulnerable. The leadership in Jerusalem was known for living lavishly in large, fine homes, wearing the finest clothing while they were taking the widow's mite from the widow, the half penny, so that she could get her Social Security benefits from the temple. And Jesus called them out on that, which is partly why they ended up working it so Jesus got killed. How is it possible? How is it possible that these learned men who had the greatest education at that time in Israel, how is it possible that they could be so dense and blind and miss that they were so missing it? Well, it's because that's what we do. And if they're in a circle together, if they're having lunch together, with the whole Sanhedrin talking together, the sort of that Supreme Court of all Judaism, and they're all asking each other, "Hey, how am I doing really? Be honest with me." You know what they're going to do when they ask that question to their peers? Their peers are going to say, "I think you're doing a great job. You look fantastic." Why is there a Looney Tunes thing happening during my teaching? That is classic. Somehow it relates. I mean, it's amazing. Here comes Daffy Duck. All right, well, anyway, I digress. So, this very same thing happens, by the way, if you, there's some research done on this and how to become more self-aware. And you know what they say about one of the worst ways to become self-aware, to really see yourself well? Is to ask your spouse or your intimate partner or your closest friends. Don't ask them. You know why? Because they care about you. And they're not going to tell you you're crap, all right? They're not going to tell you you're an idiot. For good reason. One, they care about you and they don't want to cause a kerfuffle. But the other reason, they want to make sure they keep you looking pretty good and smelling pretty good. If you go to your wife or your husband or a dear friend and you say, "Hey, how am I really?" They're not going to say, "You know what? I've read a lot about idiots in the course of human history, and I think you're near the top. I mean, wow, what a moron." I mean, why would they not tell you that? Because they're connected to you. And if you're still calling them their friend, what does that make you? Right? You have a vested interest in making sure the person that you're in a relationship with keeps looking good. You're not going to be honest. So actually, what the research suggests is if you really want to know what you're like, really, the people to ask are your coworkers, if you can get them to be honest. So NASA, one of the ways that they help get their astronauts ready to go to the International Space Station, where they're going to be in very tight quarters, very intimately connected with people from all around the world doing scientific stuff, is they take the lot of them that are up for the next journey, and they take them into the wilderness somewhere, and they get lost, and then they leave them. And they say, we'll see you in a couple, 3 weeks. And this band of astronauts has to figure out how to make it. And what they've learned is, and actually the feedback they get from the astronauts themselves is, that is such a pressure cooker environment where all of the appearances, all of the pretense is gone. You got to carry your own weight. You find out who you are and what you're made of. They say in that period of time, they learn more about themselves than they had in decades of marriage and a lifetime of friendships, because they had to be real with each other. Our own Zane Watson, Lisa and Andy Watson's youngest son, he's now a college freshman at University of Colorado. Andy Watson, Dad, he grew up going to YMCA type things his whole life. Every summer he'd be doing another trek. And so he brought his boys up doing the same thing, based out of Wisconsin. And because they elevated to a certain level, both of his boys got to do some really incredible adventures. The one that Zane did right before his senior year of high school is he, and I think it was 5 other guys, got dropped north of the Arctic Circle in Alaska with just enough camping gear, hiking gear, whatever, and just enough food to make it for like 2 days. And every 2 days, 2 or 3 days or so, they would have to navigate their way to a drop point where an airplane would give them their next supply. And he spent 2 months doing this. No guides. They all had reached a level where they should have been able to figure this out, and they did. But Zane told me that they all got along pretty well, but there was one kid who was in their group that probably was just doing it because their parents wanted him to, and his heart was not in it. And he said that guy was a problem. And he said it wasn't long before us guys had to surround this guy and say, man, you are not pulling your weight. And this is really life and death stuff. You better get your bleep together here, or we're going to leave you for dead and let the grizzlies feast on you. You know what I mean? They had to be that strong. And the guy kind of cleaned up. But Zane said, you know, this is one of the most incredible experiences in my life. And we had this kind of relationship with each other where we had to learn to accept each other, love each other well, and we grew so much. You want to know who you really are. Ask those people who see you for who you really are every day. So there's a company called Morningstar. They make tomato goods, paste, and stuff like that. I heard about this company. I looked up on their website, and this is what they do on the next slide. It says the Morningstar company was built on a foundational philosophy of self-management. We envision an organization of self-managing professionals who initiate communication and coordination of their activities with fellow colleagues, customers, suppliers, and fellow industry participants, absent directives from others. In other words, there's no boss telling them to do this stuff. It's on them. For colleagues to find joy and excitement utilizing their unique talents and to weave those talents into activities which complement and strengthen fellow colleagues' activities. And for colleagues to take personal responsibility and hold themselves accountable for achieving our mission. This company has no bosses, so to speak. If they, within these leaders at this level, if they have an idea that they want to go after, they have to run it by their peers and say, I'm thinking about going in this direction. What do you think? And they'll take a look at the person, they'll take a look at their track record in the company, and they'll either say, I don't think you've got what it takes. I don't think you have the bandwidth. I don't think you're going to follow through on it, so no. We don't think you should do it, and you're not going to do it. Or they could say, yeah, great idea. Go for it, and we'll hold you accountable for the results at the other end. That's how the company works. They review each other in real time all the time. So that if you're letting your stuff out, if your ego or whatever is in the way, you're going to know about it right away. To get a job on that leadership level, the founder of the company will come to your home for the interview and be with you for 3 to 5 hours because they want to see you in your element. Interesting. A whole different kind of leadership model that works. They're well known in the industry for what they do. Fascinating stuff. I wonder if we would be up for that. I wonder how well we would do with that. I think we struggle with it because I think the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Jewish leaders did, I think they surround themselves with other like-minded people who are all a part of the mutual appreciation club. You know what I mean? We're all going to shine each other up pretty good and make ourselves feel really good about each other. And I think Jesus knew that we are prone to such activity, that we're going to surround our people with similar voices, just like we see today in so many parts of our nation, where there seems to be no accountability because the people are not being held accountable by people other than their yes people. You know what I'm saying? And that happens. And so Jesus changed the game. At the Last Supper, you have read the book, you've seen the movie, so at the Last Supper, where Jesus is with the disciples in an upper room, this is the night that he's going to get arrested, and 24 hours later he's going to be dead on a cross. Before that happened, he gets up there, it's Passover, so everybody's there, a few extra 100,000 people are in Jerusalem. They're all having their fancy dinners that require people's feet to get washed. Well, anytime there's a big crowd, it's hard to find a foot washer. I mean, can you tell me, right? In the harvest season right now, it's hard to find a foot washer even today. I bet you have a hard time finding one, don't you? Well, think about it back then, right? When they didn't have, technology and stuff to find a good foot washer. So they were working their best, but they couldn't find a foot washer. And so they're having dinner. It's not around a table. They're all reclining, on mats and pillows and stuff. So you may be eating your hummus next to Peter's feet, and he just stepped in camel dung or whatever. So it's not a pleasant environment, right? And so Jesus, seeing what's going on and also recognizing that none of the disciples are doing anything about this, he takes matters into his own hands. He wraps a towel around his waist, gets a basin, washes the disciples' feet one by one, making them incredibly uncomfortable, making them very self-aware of where their feet had been. Intimately personal experience. They all swallowed hard. They all got humble around that dinner that night. Some other things happened. He said a few more things. But then, after he'd done this and they'd had dinner, he does this on the next slide. He says, I give you a new commandment. I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Well, that sounds a lot like the second commandment he said, but then he qualifies it. New commandment, love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. So this isn't just to our own imagination. What does it look like to Pete to love you? That's not the command. The thing for me to think about is, what does it look like for Jesus to love you? And am I doing that? Because the measure isn't just out of my own echo chamber of what I think is right and good. I'm looking to a model who nailed it. Now, some of you need to do a little theological correction here for a moment, or allow you to breathe a little bit. Some of us look at the person of Jesus and we say, no way. There's no way I can do that. He was the Son of God after all. He was human. He was entirely human. Do you know that his favorite phrase for himself, that he used many times, as did the prophet Ezekiel, is he called himself the Son of Man? Do you know what he's saying when he says, I'm the Son of Man? He says, I'm every man. I'm every man. I'm a prototype kind of a guy. I'm just like you. And so when he says, I'm just like you, and then he has these insights, and the Spirit of God is flowing in him and through him and all that, so much so that other people would say, surely you're the Son of God. That's where that came from. Then we need to step back and realize, all right, if this Son of Man, as he liked to be called, was able to do these things because he paid attention to the heartbeat of God and it manifested in multiple ways in his life, then we can too. But it's not going to be about the way that I think. It's going to be referenced constantly on what is the person of Jesus, who is he, and how did he operate in the world. It's cliche, but those old bumper stickers and little bracelets, the WWJD, what would Jesus do? It's a good question. And not just what would Jesus do, but who would Jesus be? How do you stack up against that? How does it change our self-assessment? I'll tell you how. Because if you don't use this as a measure and you're only going, I'm going to love God fully and I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, you're going to miss it. You are not going to have an honest picture of yourself because you can't. Because we won't. But if you listen to the new commandments and you say, all right, I want to measure my life against the greatest picture of health that at least we in the Christian tradition say is Jesus, well, now you've got a whole different game. Now you can trace back, and as you're thinking about making this list, step 8, you're thinking about conversations you had with people you care about and maybe people you don't care about at work. And now you can ask yourself, man, how did that actually end up? And how healthy was that? And what's my attitude about this? When I turn on the news and I have this attitude about that, how does that reflect Jesus? How am I doing on that? And in this interaction with this person or in this behavior at work or whatever the case is, now you have an accurate thing to bounce off of. And I'm wondering if you would dare do it. The good news is, the more we do this, the more we take this seriously, the easier it becomes. Now, we all will set up our own egos again and again and again. We all will find ourselves feeling pretty good about ourselves, getting lax on being humble, propping ourselves up, listening to other people's praise, and going to town with that, and we will be humbled again. You're human. And hopefully at that moment, you will remember that you are in fact human, but you have a possibility and a potential, because Jesus said you could, of becoming more and more whole and well like Jesus. So I don't know how this is going to play out for you, but I really hope you'll do it. I hope you'll take at least a moment of introspection and just go through your last week or 2 or month and just see if there are any hot spots through your calendar where things didn't exactly go the way you'd hoped, if you didn't quite say it the way you meant to. If you're in addiction with alcohol or substance, that may be more identifiable because sometimes they flare up a lot brighter and they're easier to spot. But for those everyday habitual people like we all are, they may be harder to spot. But if you have Jesus as the measure, you've got a pretty good idea what to look for. The question is, just as we drove by El Capitan and we couldn't see it because we were going too fast, even with binoculars, we were going too fast. Will you slow down to see what has always been right before your eyes? That's the question. Let's pray together. So as you close your eyes, just for your own focus, what I'd like you to do is see if there's any 1 or 2 things that stuck with you in today's service. It might be from the teaching, it might be from the songs, announcements, whatever, meditation. But what are 1 or 2 things that you can't let go of that are really sticking with you right now? Try to identify it. And as you have those 2 things before you in your mind, can you just ask the question of yourself, why might those things be sticking with me? What is it about my life right now that those things popped up? Spend a moment on that. And finally, ask yourself the question, believing that God is in the mix here. What might God be inviting us to do? Knowing that God is always about our redemption, our life at its best. What might God be asking us to do in response to what is sticking with us today? Try to answer that. God, you are present and powerful. You love us in ways we cannot comprehend. You know us intimately, deeply. You are within us, surrounding us, beyond us, all at once. You long for us to experience the life you created us to live. That is not just all about us, but a life that impacts positively every person around us and even the whole world. So God, help us see ourselves well. Our life depends on it, and we need outside help. So I'm praying, God, that you do something that hopefully we will welcome. And that is that as we go through our week, may your Spirit nudge us at times just to highlight an attitude, a behavior, words, a tone, whatever, that may need redeeming, that may be getting us off track, that may be causing others harm even if it's just ruining their day or ruining their moment. God, help us see. Help us see so that we might be. And we'll give you the thanks and praise for what you do in our lives. Help us follow Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.